Welcome to The Explainer. So, if you hear the phrase fiscal policy, and your brain immediately jumps to dry accounting ledgers or just endless bureaucratic spreadsheets, hey, you are definitely not alone. I used to think the exact same thing. But today, we're looking at fiscal policy for what it genuinely is. It's a dynamic blueprint. It's this incredible, massive mechanism that takes all of our isolated individual finances and transforms them into coordinated, large-scale national development. It is quite literally the tools societies use to build themselves.
Which brings up a pretty massive question, right? How does a nation actually pull off this magic trick? How do we take individual wealth and turn it into collective progress? Well, that right there is the foundational purpose of government economic intervention. Think about it. Without a system to gather and direct our resources, we're just millions of individuals acting totally alone. But if you have the right fiscal architecture in place, a society can build things that outlast generations.
All right, let's dive into this explainer and map out the 5 pillars of our economic foundation. We'll be hitting 1, the financial backbone, 2, taxation and spending, 3, deficits and debt, 4, infrastructure, and finally 5, public versus private. Starting off with Section 1, the financial backbone and how it shapes society. So, fiscal policy isn't just a bunch of math. It's the absolute core mechanism that dictates how modern governments actually function. You can think of it as the ultimate lever of state power. When you look at the long arc of human monetary evolution, fiscal policy is that pivotal moment where money stops being just a way for you to buy groceries at the market and starts being the way an entire society coordinates its development. It determines exactly how resources are distributed and, crucially, how national stability is maintained. Moving right along to Section 2, taxation and spending, or as I like to call it, the shared household. Notice how the revenue collection side, that's taxation, directly balances the expenditure side. Now, the roots of this system are ancient. Way back in ancient Rome, they didn't just tax your farm produce. Emperor Vespasian actually put a tax on the collection of urine from public toilets. Crazy, right? Fast forward to today, and we use much more modern mechanisms. Things like progressive income taxes, corporate taxes, and VAT. But instead of just funding ancient military campaigns, our public spending today sustains essential public goods. We're talking about things private markets just can't provide efficiently on their own, like vast healthcare systems, national defense, and wide-reaching social protection networks. If the concept of macroeconomics sounds a little intimidating, honestly, just think of it like a massive shared household fund. In a regular family, everyone might pitch in a portion of their income to keep the roof repaired, buy groceries, and maybe pay for the kids' education. Fiscal policy operates on that exact same logic, just scaled way, way up to a national level. By pooling our resources, the state can undertake huge investments that actually benefit everyone. It allows the government to redistribute wealth fairly and stabilize the chaotic ups and downs of the economy, ensuring that the whole household thrives. Okay, Section 3, deficits and debt and borrowing for stability. This immediately begs a really crucial question. What happens when that shared household fund just runs out? What do we do when immediate tax collections simply aren't enough to cover the massive societal investments a country urgently needs? In pre-modern systems, you were pretty much just out of luck. Your spending was strictly capped by whatever gold or grain you could physically collect right then and there. But modern governments, they have a fascinating way to mobilize resources from the future. Deficits actually allow the government to act as a huge stabilizing force. A budget deficit simply means that for a little while, expenditures have temporarily exceeded revenues. To bridge that gap, the government issues bonds. These bonds are scooped up by investors, banks, and pension funds who view them as super safe assets, mostly because they are literally backed by a nation's future power to tax. This is an incredibly powerful tool because during an economic downturn, deficit spending allows the state to step right in and artificially inject demand into the economy. It keeps people employed and factories running, even when the private market is pulling back. But we absolutely have to balance the double-edged nature of debt here. On one side of the ledger, we see the undeniable power of government borrowing. It acts as a massive catalyst for productivity and stabilizes the economy when it starts to falter. But look at the other side. The risks are incredibly real. If a government runs persistent, structural deficits without actually growing its economy, it just builds up rising interest obligations. Before you know it, massive chunks of tax revenue are being consumed just to pay off past interest. History is absolutely full of examples where this tipping point caused severe fiscal stress and huge crises of confidence. We've seen it play out in parts of Latin America and, very famously, in Greece. So it really is all about how effectively that borrowed money is being used.
Let's head into Section 4, Infrastructure and Real Economic Capacity. Infrastructure is exactly where a government wants to spend that borrowed money, because it's how fiscal policy translates into real, tangible economic capacity. Massive, coordinated infrastructure drives physically expand an economy's ability to produce and trade. We see this starting way back with the roads and aqueducts of the ancient era in Mesopotamia and Rome. Then you get the explosive expansion of British railways in the 1800s, completely redefining industrial trade. We saw it again with the miraculous post-war rebuilding of Japan, and we are witnessing it right now with the modern high-speed rail and port networks in China. The real reason infrastructure is such a brilliant investment is that it systematically reduces economic friction. By building roads, energy grids, and digital networks, transportation costs just plummet. People can easily travel to exactly where the jobs are. It helps to think of productive infrastructure exactly like a biological circulatory system. Just as your blood vessels efficiently deliver nutrients to every single cell in your body, infrastructure effortlessly moves goods, labor, and information through every corner of the economic system. And finally, Section 5, Public versus Private and the Hybrid System. You see, no modern economy is entirely run by the state, nor is it entirely run by private businesses. It's a hybrid system. Think of the entire economy as a vast transportation network. The public sector is responsible for the roads and the traffic rules. It provides the public goods, the legal frameworks, and the overall stability that makes everything safe and predictable. The private sector, which is driven by profit and innovation, acts as the vehicles driving on those roads. They're flexible, they're fast, and they're highly competitive. Ultimately, you really need both to get anywhere. And here is exactly how they feed into each other. The step-by-step feedback loop shows why striking the right balance is absolutely vital. Step 1. The government uses its fiscal power to invest in strong legal systems and quality public education. Step 2. Those educated citizens and stable laws drastically enhance the productivity and the innovation of private firms. Then, Step 3. As those private firms grow and become more profitable, they expand the nation's tax base. That larger tax base then allows the government to fund even better public services. It's an incredible cycle. If the government dominates too much, you risk bureaucratic stagnation. But if the private sector runs totally unchecked, you risk market failures and instability. It is a continuous, very delicate balance.
Through disciplined taxation, careful spending, and smart infrastructure investment, governments bridge time and literally shape the destiny of their nations. But this stable foundation, it's really just the launching pad, which leaves us with a fascinating final question. Once a government establishes this secure, predictable economic environment, how do private businesses and everyday individuals use that stability to mobilize enormous amounts of capital for their own innovations? How do they actually trade ownership of that future growth? Well, that precise foundation completely sets the stage for our next major topic, the structure and function of the stock market. Thanks so much for tuning into this explainer, and stay curious.